It's not the same as meeting in Eccleston Square, but it's certainly one way of interacting with each other and joining together in practice. Okay, so I'm going to ask you now just to sit in any way that feels appropriate for you, and just arrive in the room that you're in and in this online meeting in any way, just for a few minutes whilst people arrive, because they're going to still be coming in. So I just ask you to sit quietly and just arrive where you are right now. So a very warm welcome to you. Most people seem to have arrived. There doesn't seem to be anyone left in the waiting room. So my name's Richard Bober, and I co-work this Thursday evening basic meditation class with Colin. And this term we also have joining us Ajahn Subado, and he'll be taking the class next week. One of the things that I wanted to address this evening as we proceed into our practice together is just a consideration of some of the really basic elements of the Buddha's message when he taught his disciples to meditate. And I just want to mention that right at the beginning. If you just think about what we did just then, we sat just completely unstructured, just for a few minutes together. I just said to you, just sit and arrive wherever you are. So where did you go in that time? It's about just under 5 minutes. What happened for you? Where did your mind go? And what does it mean to really arrive? So those are some of the considerations that we move into when we begin to meditate. What does it mean to actually arrive? Not just in the physical space that we're in the room we're in, but here in this moment. And perhaps to just help us with that, I'm going to offer you a series of exercises this evening, meditative exercises, just to offer you some ways, some basic ways that we can start to build our own inner resources to help us do that arriving, so that wherever we are, in whatever situation, whatever moment or movement we're in life, we can actually draw on those resources and arrive in the present moment. So this evening, that will be one element. We will do some meditative exercises together. I will offer those to you. And there'll probably be about 3 of them, lasting roughly 10 minutes each, maybe a little bit longer. And they'll be progressive. And that'll take us through till about 7:30. And then perhaps we'll have a little opportunity for some questions and just explore whatever has emerged during that time, our time together. One of the points I wanted to make right at the beginning of this session, really to frame the direction of our time together, was that the Buddha's message to us, a lot has been written about it and a lot has been talked about it, and that's certainly true. But it's essentially terribly simple. There is a pointing throughout the Buddha's teachings. This is what brings us to meditate. It's the pointing directly to the way from suffering, the path that leads us beyond suffering. What is it that moves us towards happiness? And that's the basic pointing. It's actually terribly simple. That's not to say to do it is simple, but the actual pointing is simple. So I invite you now into the first of these meditative exercises, and many of you will have been here before, but we're going to work with the body. And this is the basic beginning point for any meditator. We begin by locating our attention in our physical body. So how do we do that? Well, I invite you now just to sit in an upright posture, wherever you are, and do get comfortable. See if you can find a position that's really comfortable and upright at the same time. The comfort is important. If you're going to sit in meditation for any length of time, one doesn't want to be finding that after a few minutes you're in agony because you're not sitting in a reasonable position. And as I've already said, the Buddha's message was to lead us from suffering, not to create more. So a straight back is one of the prerequisites for a meditator. And as many of my teachers have said, make the back, your spine, make that the centerpiece of your physical posture. So let's be quite clear what we're talking about here. It doesn't need to be rigid. It doesn't need to be bolt upright as though you're on a military parade ground, but just reasonably upright. So that prompts alertness, because we want to be awake for what we're doing here. And then at the same time, see if you can find a way of being relaxed around that upright spine. So relaxation may be quite difficult for some people, and I want to acknowledge that. And if you do have a problem with relaxation, one way in might be just to soften the body, just soften the muscles, at the same time keeping that basic uprightness. And however you're sitting, the other element here is don't try too hard. So keep it light. And the other thing we need to remember with meditation is to have a firm foundation. So I invite you just to bring your attention to your points of contact with the floor. If you're sitting on a chair, it'll be the soles of your feet. If you're sitting cross-legged on a cushion on the floor, it'll be your ankles and your shins. So wherever you're touching the floor, just for a moment or two, drop your attention down and really feel the contact with the floor, with the ground, with the earth that is supporting you. And here's an important point here. With any of these parts of the body that I mention, the invitation is to feel, really sense the contact. It's not about imagining that part of the body or thinking about it. It really is about feeling, sensing in a physical way. And when you feel you've connected with the floor, and you feel grounded, supported by the floor. I invite you now just to contact your sitting bones on the chair or the cushion and just get a sense of pressure, weight, how your bones are supporting the weight of your torso. Just really feel that contact. See if you can find a neutral position for your hands, just resting in your lap or on your thighs, upturned or downturned. Just something that feels comfortable, where you don't have to think about what you're going to do with your hands. And the other invitation is to close your eyes. You can have them open and have them downcast, looking at a neutral piece of floor or a wall, something like that. But with the eyes, the invitation is to limit the input. So in whatever way works for you. But many traditions have a closed eye posture. But if you need to open them to keep awake, that's fine too. So that's the basic position. See if you can have a sense of being pliable, soft, relaxed. And if you're new to meditation and you're feeling uncomfortable, do feel free just to experiment with your posture and to get into a position that you can hold for 20 minutes, half an hour or so. So the next element of this basic meditation posture I invite you to cultivate is see if you can align your head and your neck with your spine and your spine with your pelvis and your sitting bones, so that everything is in a nice, relaxed, upright column. So if anything is feeling tense or rigid, then feel free to adjust that and just get a sense of being aligned, upright, at the same time soft, relaxed, and pliable. Okay, that's the first little exercise. So just let that go, and you feel free to move, readjust your posture, take a sip of water, whatever you need to do. And I'll just talk for a little while before we move into our next little exercise. So if you're new to meditation, that is one way of establishing a basic meditation posture. Now, there are lots of other elements, fine touches that one can include, but maybe we'll leave those for the moment. But that's enough about the basic posture to be imbibed in one bite this evening. Just to say a couple of words about why we have such a posture and the particular points about it. The upright part of it, and I'm sure Colin has talked about this with you last term and this term, the upright part of it is to promote alertness, because one of the things that we need in meditation and in life is we need to be alert. We need to cultivate that alertness. Part of the Buddha's message was about waking up, awakening. And if we're asleep, we can't do that. So the alertness is a key part of the posture. So as we hold our bodies, so the mind will follow. So the physical is really very important here. But as I mentioned in that little exercise, don't be rigid about it. Keep the body soft and relaxed at the same time as being upright. And that's the second part to mention. I'm sure lots of meditation teachers, if you've listened to them before, will emphasize these 2 points. Keep it relaxed. This is not a rigid practice. The whole point of the practice is to change certain aspects of ourselves. And if we're rigid to begin with, that's going to create stuckness and doesn't create the right conditions for change. So pliable and relaxed is a much more open and receptive place to be. So if we can include that in our physical posture right from the word go, it helps. So there's a subtle balance being invited here. It's the balance between being upright and alert and being relaxed. Normally we associate relaxation with being slumped on the settee watching the telly or something like that. But here we're cultivating relaxation and alertness at the same time. And that's quite possible. We know that from the neuroscientists, that these are two capabilities, capacities that we all have, the capacity to be alert and the capacity to be relaxed. And all we're doing here in meditation is we're quite consciously and deliberately, we're combining them. And we do this to begin with by setting our physical posture in this way. So we include both these elements. So let's do another little exercise using that posture. And again, this will be about 10, maybe 12 minutes or so. And this time we're going to just scan our bodies. Now, many meditation classes, I know the mindfulness movement, if you go to a mindfulness class, this is a really basic part of the practice. And so too here in the Buddhist world, scanning the body is really useful. I just mentioned a couple of points about why it's useful. You may already have gleaned that from the preceding exercise, and indeed the little 5-minute arrival sit that we did right at the beginning at 6:30. If you locate your attention in an aspect of your physical body, you then move into the present moment. So many of us spend a lot of our time thinking, and we're very much occupied up here. If we drop our attention down, for instance, into the feet, and we start to really feel and sense the feet on the ground or the ankles and the shins on the floor, we move out of our thinking mode. It helps us be present in whatever's going on right now. And that's a really important part of the practice. Okay, I won't talk any more about that. I'll just talk you through it. So I invite you now to go back into that basic posture that we established right at the beginning. So an upright spine, contact your feet on the floor or your ankles and shins on the ground. And everything is an invitation here. So I invite you just to locate your attention in your physical body. And then I invite you to move your attention to the crown of your head. And just for a moment, just lengthen a fraction towards the sky. So it pulls your head and your neck and your spine just a fraction upwards, so that everything is aligned and upright. Just feel for a moment or two the crown of your head. And then I invite you to drop your attention down through your head, taking in your face at the front, the sides of your head, the ears, and the back of your head, and the back of your neck. And just really feel. The invitation is to feel. Just feel the weight of your head, the sensations in it. Just feel how your neck is supporting the weight of your head. Feel the air on your face. And then the invitation is to drop your attention down into your neck and your shoulder area. Again, not thinking about or imagining, but really feeling. What does it feel like? Just notice any tension you're carrying in the neck and shoulder area. The invitation is simply to notice it. And there's an important point here. Simply to notice it, feel it, without judgment, without comparison. Just what does it feel like right now? And then the invitation is to drop your attention down again into your shoulders, your upper arms, down to the elbows. Again, just feeling, sensing. From the elbows, drop down your forearms, include your wrists and your hands. And then sense your fingers and your thumbs. And then I invite you to return your attention to your torso, to your shoulder area, the front of your chest. Just drop your attention down again through your torso. Perhaps you might notice breath, perhaps even the heartbeat. Again, notice without judgment. Just how is it right now? And then drop your attention down again into your abdomen, down towards your pelvis. Just noticing everything throughout your torso, and come to rest at your sitting bones on the chair or the cushion. Again, the invitation is to sense, to feel, not to think about or imagine. Just noticing without judgment. And from the sitting bones, I invite you to drop your attention down your upper legs, your thighs, that's the quadriceps at the front, and your hamstrings or the biceps femoris at the back. Just drop your attention down, feeling the contact with the chair or the cushion. down towards your knees. Again, just sensing, noticing, without judgment. And from your knees, just drop your attention down your lower legs, your shins at the front, and your calves at the back. Just drop down towards your ankles, and then take in your feet, the soles of your feet and your toes, and indeed notice the contact with the floor. And then I invite you just to go back and take in the whole of your physical body, from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, including your upright spine and your sitting bones. Just feel the clothes on your skin surface and the air on your hands and your face. Just get a sense of the boundaries of your physical body. So just let that go for a moment or two. Please feel free to adjust your posture and stretch. Take a sip of water. So that's the second of those little meditative exercises. So we've done a basic posture and we've done a very short body scan. Now, just to say about the body scan, this is a really important part of practice, of basic meditation practice. And if you go on retreat at, say, Amaravati, not that they're running retreats at the moment, but in the days when they did, one could spend 50 minutes, an hour doing that several times a day, sometimes even longer, depending on who was running the retreat. But it's considered a really important part of practice. It's just scanning the body like that. And there are different ways of doing it. Head downwards or feet upwards or heart outwards. There are various different routes that you can take. But that's one way of doing it. What we just did there was from the crown of the head down, and then a basic sense of the whole of the physical body. And one of the points I was emphasizing there was that of non-judgment, not judging what we find when we notice. So we're noticing parts of the body, and we might very easily get into judgments about them, like, I don't like this bit of me, this bit aches and I wish it wouldn't, or etc., etc. And that's quite normal and natural, and I guess from time to time we all do that. And one of the invitations here in this practice is to see if we can just let go of those judgments. We're just noticing things as they are, and we're not adding to it. So if there is an ache or part of us that feels not okay in some way, uncomfortable, the invitation is to notice just how it is without adding to it, like, I've got to do something about this, I can't bear it, I wish it would go away. We may do that as well, but the important point initially is to see if we can just let go of those judgments. And if we find ourselves judging again, this is where it gets really subtle, and it's a very clever invitation, this practice. If we find ourselves judging, we don't judge that either. So many of us will have quite judgmental habits of mind, and one or two basic meditation sits are not going to unravel those habits. So we can just notice that. We don't have to judge that. We can just say, okay, that's a habit I have. I have a habit to judge these things. And that's quite normal and natural. And we don't have to get into a big number about it. So there's a really important point here. One of the 7 pillars they talk about in mindfulness practice is non-judging. That's the important point I've been emphasizing here. But almost all meditation teachers at some point will talk about acceptance. Just this sense of accepting things as they are. And I used to go on retreats with Ajahn Sumedho Longpo many years ago when he was abbot at Amaravati. And that was one of his favorite sayings was, it's like this. It's like this. So you just notice how your body is or how your mind is. And the attitude that he was encouraging, he was cultivating was, it's like this. Nothing more, nothing less. This is the way it is. So he wasn't adding to how things were. He wasn't complicating it. It was just, it's like this. And that's the whole point about non-judgmental noticing. There's a basic acceptance embedded within it. And the other point I would like to make about this is I often talk in both the lunchtime session that I lead at the Buddhist Society and in this class, I often talk about weaving in kindness for yourself right from the outset of your practice. And here's the point. This attitude of accepting something just as it is, without judgment, without adding anything to it, this is being kind to yourself. You're not complicating how things are. You're just noticing. This is essentially a kind, compassionate stance. And this is one of the attitudes that's really important to bring into your practice, right from the word go. This brings me back to point I made right at the very beginning. The basic direction of the Buddha's teachings was he was pointing the way from suffering. There wasn't, I mean, yes, there are sort of lots of things written and talked about all the ramifications of the teachings, and there's, the Pali Canon is huge and vast, and you can spend a lifetime studying it. But the basic direction is the path from suffering, the Eightfold Noble Path. And that includes in big measure being kind to yourself, kindness, metta to yourself. And I would just encourage you to see if right from the word go with your practice, if you can weave that in, a non-judgmental acceptance of the way things are is part of that weaving. Okay. The third basic meditation exercise I want to offer to you this evening, and many of you will be familiar with this, is working with the breath. Now, this is really important, and it's a basic part of our practice. And this is so rich. There is so much to learn from the breath. It is so nutritious to work with the breath. We could spend a lifetime doing this. So here's the way in, one way in. This is the invitation. So if you go back to your basic upright meditation posture, so just re-establish that in the way that we've already done so this evening. Feet on the floor, or the points of contact on the floor, an upright spine. Close your eyes, neutral hand position. Relax. Just direct your attention inwards. And then the invitation is to notice the breath. And one thing we can do to help us is right at the beginning of this little exercise, is I invite you to take 2 deep in and out breaths. So in, out 1, in, out 2, just a bit deeper than normal, so that we know what we're working with. So just do that. In, out 1, in, out 2, just a bit deeper than normal. So we get a sense of the movement of the breath. And then the invitation is to leave the breath alone. Having done those 2 deeper breaths, we just leave it alone, completely alone. And the invitation is just to notice it. So, what are we talking about here? Let's be quite clear. The invitation is to directly feel the movement caused by the breath. So this is about sensing once again. We're not thinking about the breath. We're not imagining it. We're directly sensing the movement caused by the breath. Where do you feel it most vividly? There's no one way. There's no right answer to that. It could be different for every one of you. But traditionally, it will be in the chest area, or the abdomen, or even at the rim of the nostrils. So where does it occur most vividly for you? So if you're new to practice, just experiment a bit to find where it's easiest for you to sense the breath. And once you've found what works for you, stick with that. And then the invitation is simply to witness the breath. Allow it to come to you. And the important thing for all of us, wherever we are in our journey with practice, is if we drift off onto thoughts, we haven't made a mistake. This is natural, this is normal. We simply notice it without judgment, with kindness, and then we relocate our attention back on the sensation of the movement of the breath. So please feel free to move, readjust your posture, stretch, take a sip of water. Just to say a few words about that practice we did just then, working with the breath. So this, as I said before we moved into it, this is a core practice, and it's one that can actually last with you a lifetime. But for many of you, if you're new to practice, one of the questions that frequently arises is, well, I keep drifting off from the breath onto thoughts. And what am I doing wrong? And everyone else must be doing it absolutely spot on, staying with the breath the whole time. Well, it's not quite like that. And the important point to register here is that this is not a concentration practice. You're not being invited to lock on rigidly to the breath. It's simply an anchor for your attention. If you drift off onto thoughts, you haven't made a mistake. I mean, think about it. The lungs breathe, the heart beats, and the mind thinks. It's natural, it's normal. That's what it's designed to do. The reason for using the breath as an anchor like this is simply as a training. It's a light way of just relocating our attention, breaking the chain, the thought spirals, the chain of thoughts that we often get sucked into. It's a way of not identifying with our thoughts. It's a way of letting go. And we have it with us always. We're always breathing from the moment we're born to the moment we die. So we don't have to actually do anything special to tap into this resource. It's always there. So part of the practice, as I indicated, as I invited you, was to simply allow the breath to arise. And all you have to do is notice it, witness it, without judgment. So if you do find yourself thinking, and everyone does, experienced long-term meditators, advanced meditation masters in monasteries or in caves in the Himalayas, they'll drift off onto thoughts. And the important point is that it's just being used as a means of relocating your attention and breaking that spiral. The other thing to say about it is, because the breath is based in the physical, it's very much a bodily thing. And like we were doing in the first two practices this evening, we were locating our attention in the physical body, and the breath is part of that. And once we are located in the physical body, we are in the present moment. So you think about it. If you're resting your attention on the breath, it's not on the next breath, it's not on the last breath, it's on this breath. It's right now in the present moment. So this is one way, one very useful way of moving our attention into the present. And much of meditation practice, not all, much of it is about learning to inhabit the present moment. And I started off this evening session by saying that the direction of the Buddha's teaching was to move us away from suffering and towards happiness. And I know that we're living, all of us, we're living through very difficult times at the moment. We're not in an easy situation, and many of us in very difficult situations. There is a lot of suffering around. To use the Pali word, there's a lot of dukkha in our lives. And one way of moving with that is to look in the right place for the way out. Now, much of the world around us says that if we can find the right conditions in life, we will be happy. And yes, there's a certain truth in that. If we have a roof over our heads, if we have good health, if we have enough to eat, etc., those are very likely to provide some preconditions for happiness. They remove one layer of suffering. But the Buddha was pointing at something else. He was saying something much more profound. He was saying all those worldly conditions, they're fragile, they're unstable, they're not permanent, they're subject to change. So where in that situation, given the way the world is, where can we find the way from suffering? And very much he was pointing us to look within and to look at the present moment of our life. And part of the Noble Eightfold Path is to practice meditation. And this is one of the invitations, is to learn to train our minds, our attention, to locate our attention in the present moment. So working with the breath is really important. And don't get hung up about concentrating on it. Keep it light, keep it gentle, keep it kind above all, keep it kind. As I said earlier in this evening session, see if you can find a way of weaving into your practice kindness and self-compassion right from the word go. And the breath is a perfect instrument for actually facilitating that. So if you have any questions or you'd like to sort of get me to talk some more about anything, I don't think I have all the answers, but I could certainly point you in the right direction, I hope. You're welcome to put those in the chat, or if you want to unmute and just ask, that's fine too. Okay, a few messages in the chat from people leaving. Okay, it's very good that if you do have to leave, that's fine. Thank you very much for attending, and your presence is really valuable and appreciated in this online sangha. Yeah, okay, Tim, would you like to unmute? I think you had a question. Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, yeah. Sorry, I'm using my son's computer. And when you said Tim, my name's Alan.
Oh, Alan. Okay, yes. Sorry.
Sorry. This is the very first time I've been to the basic meditation on a Thursday evening. A very good friend of mine who's a Buddhist would have loved to have joined in, but couldn't. Is there any way they can actually see this? Has it been videoed or recorded? So they can see it at another time?
Yeah, yes, indeed. This session is being recorded, and if you go onto the Buddhist Society website, probably in a few days' time, you will be able to access all the online recordings of teachings. And I think last year, when the Buddhist Society had to go online, they started recording teachings. So there's a whole catalogue now of these sessions. So yes, it will be there.
Oh, ever so good. What a lovely idea.
Okay, so
and one other quick question. Because it must have been, gosh, 30 odd years ago, nearly 40, when I came to London to Eccleston Square and sat there and went through a lot of these. And I've been to Amaravati a few times. One thing is when you're in meditation and you have an awful urge to have a scratch because you've got a real itch happening somewhere on your body. Just remind us what you do there.
Okay, that's a lovely question. I really appreciate it. It's a great question. Okay, so the itch or the scratch, the urge to scratch during meditation. This is it's quite a common, frequent question that's asked, and there are a number of ways of working with this. Firstly, a lot of teachers would say if you have an urge to scratch an itch during meditation, you are blessed. This is such a wonderful teacher. This is such a good place to learn about craving, desire, letting go. So the basic message is just notice it. Notice the urge. Notice the discomfort. Know that this is dukkha. This is precisely what the Buddha meant by suffering. And the urge to get rid of it is craving to eliminate suffering from your life. Nothing wrong with that. It's the attachment to the craving that's the problem. So that's a bit of teaching around the subject. What to do with the itch is see if, when you've first noticed it, if you can just be with it, if there's some way of being with the discomfort. So you might need just to soften around the itch, just relax your muscles, relax the area physically around the itch, remaining still all the time, just noticing the urge, the itch, and your efforts to relax around it, and see if it changes. All phenomena, we are taught, are impermanent. The itch is impermanent. So although the intensity may seem excruciating when you first notice it, after a little while, it may change. That's worth noticing. After a little while, it may even dissipate and go. That's worth noticing. And if it doesn't, see if you can just find a way of being with it. So if none of that works, then you may have to decide, I need to scratch this itch. Well, do so. Do so mindfully. Relieve the suffering because it's in your power to do so. So do it mindfully, knowing that you are moving, you're taking care of yourself, you're removing one layer of suffering, and you haven't failed, you haven't lost the meditation practice, you can return to it. Be gentle with yourself. So there's two options there. But I think the way that I would encourage anyone working with something like this in meditation is, in the first instance, see if you can find a way of being with it. This can teach you so much because, you know, like most physical itches, they are trivial. You're not going to die from it. Most, not all, but most. And so this is a perfect opportunity to practice working with a craving and with a discomfort, knowing this is dukkha and finding a way of being with it without having to eliminate it, get rid of it. Because that's initially the first tendency. We want to get rid of suffering. We don't like it. It's uncomfortable. But it can teach us so much about life. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
There's a lot more one can say. In fact, I've heard whole Dharma talks lasting an hour about an itch. So great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, it was. Yes, someone has put in the chat, best question ever, and I would agree with that. It's a great question.
Yeah.
I'd tell you one of the other things that's frequently arises, though, as a question in practice, is when that third sit we did, working with the breath, and the issue of thoughts, and many people just feel that if they are thinking, they're not doing the meditation correctly. And I would really want to dispel that and emphasize that thought is natural. If you find yourself thinking in meditation practice, you haven't made a mistake. It is not a mistake. It's natural. It's normal. The practice is to notice it. The practice is to notice, and as Colin would frequently remind us, to let go. So the breath is a means of breaking the chain of thought. We notice that we're not on the breath, that we've drifted off onto a thought spiral, whatever it is, important, trivial, urgent, absolutely just daydream stuff, whatever. It doesn't matter. Once we've noticed that we're not on the breath, we can let it go and return to the breath, because we have a place to actually rest our attention on. So it's not about concentrating, it's about repeatedly, patiently, over and over again, session after session, minute after minute, hour after hour of meditation practice, noticing, returning to the breath, noticing, returning to the breath. It's a training. It's a work in progress. And after time, if we can learn to do this gently, kindly, with patience, then things do begin to shift and change. There's another question high in the chat. Okay, that's a great question. The question is, what is the best amount of time to meditate in one session? So, I could give a Dharma talk for an hour on that one. The short answer is, it's like, how long is a piece of string? Now, if you're new to meditation, my sense is just sit for a short amount of time. If 5 minutes is all you can manage, then do 5 minutes. If 10 minutes is all you can manage, then just do 10 minutes. But the important point here is to do it regularly. I think most meditation teachers would say it's more important to establish a regular, everyday practice than it is to do vast lengths of time in practice. So if you can find a particular time of day, and often you will find that the model from the monastics in the monasteries is a good place to start is early morning, because the rest of the world hasn't got going yet, and it's usually quieter. If you can find a regular time to practice, set aside that practice, make that your time. 7 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, whatever it is. It may not be in the morning, it's possible for you. It may have to be evening, but set aside a regular time and sit with commitment at that time regularly every day. And I think that's more important than the length of time. And then if you're new to practice, start with a short amount of time and gradually build it up. I know the mindfulness teachers in secular mindfulness do say that 20 minutes is a good time to aim for, as a sort of a time to practice. So that's worth noting, that some of the neuroscientists have said that around 20 minutes is a good ballpark figure to aim for. But you may have to build up to that. And that's fine. Take your time in building up to it. Okay, there's another question. Is there a place in meditation to actually focus on a thought or feeling? Yes, absolutely there is. So this is the next question in the chat. Yes, there is a place. Thoughts and feelings can actually be a really valid part of practice, and you'll find I don't have time to teach that here in this session, but perhaps the next session I run, or maybe Colin next week, or sorry, Colin in a couple of weeks, or even Ajahn Subhado may address that. But yes, thoughts and feelings are a very valid part of practice. You'll find in the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the fundamental teaching on meditation practice, you'll find there's a whole section devoted to mindfulness of thoughts and mindfulness of feelings. And there is a particular way that we can use thoughts and we can learn to work with them rather than trying to eliminate them. So great question. Yes, and perhaps one of the teachers in this class this term will address that. I'll make a note of circulating that to my colleagues. One other question in the chat. Next question is it okay to only do guided meditations, or should we be practicing on our own? Great question. I think this is a very individual thing. There are some people that work very well with guided meditations. And if you can work on your own eventually, that's a place to look to as well. Guided meditations can be great. And there are a lot of them online. If you go to the Buddhist Society website, you'll find that some of the teachers have done some wonderful guided meditations, and they're very useful, and they can be a great help and a great support. And I would also add that ultimately, I think probably I would say, and many teachers would say, if you can work eventually, build up to working on your own, that's a good place to aim for as well. You know, the basic direction, the pointing of the Buddha's teachings was that we have within us, each and every one of us, we have within us our own resources, our own way out of suffering, our own way towards happiness. And ultimately, we find that within ourselves. And teachers and teachings and guidance are great, they're useful, they're supportive, but eventually we need to find our own inner resource. But perhaps when we're starting out, that's fine, we use guided meditations. Any other questions? No, I think that's probably everything. Okay, I'm noticing the time. I'm really appreciative for you joining us this online sangha this evening. It's, you know, I think it's great that we come together to meditate together. It's really important, especially in these difficult times. I'm just going to close this evening with offering you the closing homage from the Theravadan tradition. So, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dharma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. So thank you all very much for attending this evening. I look forward to seeing some of you again, and Ajahn Subodo will be here next week. I wish you well.